Yes. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? 3 questions we should all be asking ourselves every day. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Well, tonight my purpose is to share with you my journey over the past 4 or 5 years of a lot of research into leadership and more recently into how the hell are we going to get out of this mess we're in at a global level. And I must say it's been a fantastic and interesting journey to think about that solidly for the last couple of years. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about many of the things that I've been doing and thinking about and sharing that with you. And hopefully it might resonate with you, and hopefully there may be some new ideas there that you can pick up and run with. So let me get underway right away and say right now at the beginning, what I want to talk about is, where are we in the world with this topic called leadership? And where are we? Well, we're in crisis. We're in crisis because we're leaving behind a whole belief structure about leadership which isn't working. It's not working anywhere in the world. And we need to move to a new leadership paradigm, and I'm going to describe what that might be. But first of all, it's just not me who's talking about this. Here's 3 people from Harvard Business School saying things like, after conducting 14 formal studies and more than 1,000 interviews, directly observing dozens of executives in action and compiling innumerable surveys, I'm completely convinced that most organizations today lack the leadership they need. And this is John Kotter, a well-known person at Harvard Business School. And then Shoshana Zuboff says something similar, but I'll just go to what I put in bold. She said, we've managed to produce a generation of managers and business professionals that is deeply mistrusted and despised by a majority of people in our society and around the world. This is a terrible failure. These are people at Harvard Business School. Okay, one more, Bill George, who I really admire. He says, the problem is we have a wrong-headed notion of what constitutes a leader, driven by obsession with leaders at the top. He says, every successful business leader has to make the shift from I to we. From I to we. So, what is this mess that we've got into with this old paradigm leadership? Well, we've got lots of issues going on. I mean, right now the global economy is number one, and quite frankly, if you were to ask me to make a prediction, and I know you're not going to ask me, but I'm going to tell you, I think we're in for a big collapse pretty soon. And I'm actually really delighted about that, because we will, from those ashes will come something which benefits everybody in a more equal way than it does at the moment. Right now, it's all about the elites, the powerful elites, the business elites, and all about making money, and it's all about development as economic growth, which is the basic idea of the World Bank. Now, I worked at the World Bank 18 years, so I know all about the World Bank, but we've got lots of issues, and also in Europe. Global terrorism, I don't need to say too much about all of these. Pollution, energy resilience, pandemics, species extinction, food resilience, waste, poverty, water shortages, climate change, and natural disasters. And you know what? We can't solve those problems at the same level of thinking that we created them. You see, you look around and see what's happening in the world right now, and the G20 and everything. They're tinkering. They're trying to fix something that is fundamentally broken. Yes, I got somebody here who really talks my language. Okay, she's been saying that for years. What did you say? Yeah, we're going to work together before the end of the evening. Well, watch out. So what's this all about? Well, basically, the problems of existence have become global, but the decision-making structures we have for dealing with them are national. We cannot move forward without a high degree of global cooperation. And what's getting in the way? Self-interest of our leaders. And in a certain extent, we are our own problem too, because, in the rich nations, we're not feeling the pain, so we really don't want to do anything. And so what's got to happen is we've all got to feel the pain. And then something will happen. I love this quote from Tex Gunnings. He says, he's from Unilever, he is no longer, but at that time he was. He said, the paradigm that divides the world into the social sector, the private sector, and the government sector is not working. It creates artificial barriers where each are constituted the problem. So we have to combine our forces, our efforts, and our competences. So I would say this is, business is really a wholly owned subsidiary of society, and society is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. If we lose our environment and our life support systems, our society will perish. And if we lose our society, we will lose our economy and our business will perish too. See, not many business leaders have got that understanding that they're part of a much bigger system. And they're stuck in their own little world. But you see, they live a very schizophrenic life because, during the day, they're trying to run their businesses, not caring about these economic externalities of the environment, etc. And they come home in the evening and they're bouncing their grandchildren on their knees, thinking, well, I really need to have a sustainable future for my grandchildren. That's a terrible place to live in. And so there's this beginning to grow a recognition that business is a part of society. And I love this new movement. I'm interested to see where it's going, conscious capitalism, which takes some of these ideas and says, yes, business is part of society. And yes, we can run business profitably, but let's do it in a way where we care about everybody. I really recommend the book, Firms of Endearment. Firms of Endearment really gets into this in a deep way. So we need a new leadership paradigm, a shift from a focus in I to we, a shift from self-interest to the common good, and from being the best in the world to the best for the world. So many businesses, when they do their vision and mission statements, it's like to be the number one supplier of. Well, quite frankly, nobody gives a damn. As a customer, I don't care if you're the number one supplier. What I want to know is, how are you impacting my world? So I would say ultimately the problems of existence we face are issues of consciousness. And we'll only get beyond this stage of our collective evolution if we can put aside our narrow self-interest and focus on the whole system and build a values-driven framework of policies that support the common good. But I have some good news. For the first time in human history, we have the possibility of making the evolution of consciousness conscious. Why? Because we can measure it. That is actually the first time in 14 billion years of evolution we've actually been able to measure consciousness. If you can measure something, you can manage it. I'm going to show you how we do that. It's in these two books that I wrote some time ago, but I'll just give you a quick overview of the model that I use. It's based on Maslow's hierarchy, which you're probably all familiar with. He called these lower order needs the deficiency needs. We don't get any sense of lasting satisfaction if we, for being able to meet these needs, but we feel a sense of anxiety if these needs are not met. So it's that physiological needs, love and safety, and self-esteem. And but once we've got these needs met, it doesn't really matter. We move on to our growth needs, what Maslow calls self-actualization. And when these needs are fulfilled, we just want to go on and get deeper and deeper into that space because it brings us happiness and joy instead of anxiety and fear. So what I did was I took Maslow's concept of self-actualization and I broke it down into some component parts that I arrived at by studying Vedic philosophy. The concept of soul consciousness, cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, and unity consciousness. And when I looked deeply into what that meant, I realized it was just different levels of self-actualization. So I blended Maslow from the West with Vedic philosophy from the East and built this 7 levels of consciousness model. So I expanded self-actualization. I substituted states of consciousness for hierarchy of needs, and each state of consciousness is defined by specific values and behaviors. So what I'm saying is, any level of consciousness you care to name in these 7 levels, if you tell me what your values are, I can tell you which levels of consciousness you're operating from. That's how we can measure consciousness. So, this is the personal consciousness, survival. It's about financial security, putting food on the table, and creating a safe environment for you and your family. And then we move to relationship consciousness. That's about belonging, and it's about feeling loved by yourself and loving yourself and loving others too. And at level 3, we talk about the feeling of self-worth, pride in your personal performance, and feeling a positive sense of order in your life. Now, these 3 needs are needs that we all grow up with when we're first born and we move through those early years of our life. This represents our normal development. And when we have any subconscious fears about meeting these needs, then we get these limiting values showing up at level 1, control and greed, being liked and blame and power and status. In other words, what happens is, during those first 7 years of our lives, when our limbic brain is well developed, but our prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part of our brain, is not functioning, we look at everything that happens in our world from the point of view of satisfying, bringing pleasure and avoiding pain, but it's attached to emotional thinking. There's no reasoning goes on. And so during those first 7 or 8 years of our lives, if we learn that we do not have enough, or we're not loved enough, or we are not enough, those stay with us for the rest of our lives. And that becomes the fodder for psychotherapists. And let me tell you, everybody is brought up in a dysfunctional family. And if you have a family, it is dysfunctional, I can tell you. Babies are born trusting. It's the only way to be born into the world, and they lose that trust through the relationships that they build. But to what extent depends on the degree of self-actualization of their parents. If their parents are highly self-actualized, they can bring up a baby with minimal fears, subconscious fears, at these first 3 levels. But if like the masses, people are brought up in difficult conditions, and they learn how hard it is to be in their life, and that maybe they've got abusive parents, and how difficult it is to find pleasure and avoid pain. And, that stays with us then for the rest of our lives and colors everything that we do. But, it's our stuff, and we just have to, and we begin to realize that, if I want to lead a better life, I better move to level 4. I better understand why I'm creating this upset. Because the truth is, nobody upsets you. You upset yourself by your beliefs about what is happening. You trigger the old belief that you learned in childhood when you weren't having a good time. And so when you say, you make me angry, wait a minute. No, you triggered my belief, fear-based belief, and that made me angry. It's all about you. If you're upset, it's all about you. It's not about the other person. They're just helping you grow. Sometimes that's hard to remember in the heat of the moment. So you have to insert a pause before you actually do something. Because otherwise you're just going to react from that subconscious belief. Well, if you can insert a pause, you can move to conscious belief-based decision making, and you can actually reflect before something happens. Any of you ever received an email and you go, oh my God, I sent it to everybody. And then you regret it. That's a reaction from the subconscious fear-based belief that you're hanging on to. I'm going to talk about how to let that go later. So we move to level 4, personal growth. Understanding our deepest motivations and experiencing responsible freedom. This is called the level of individuation, where you begin to let go of the beliefs that you learnt during childhood and the beliefs of your culture which no longer serve you. And this is where true freedom is, in becoming your own person. And then we move fully into level 5, where you begin to encounter your soul. The ego fully meets the soul. The soul appears at level 4 because in that individuation, letting go of the fears of the ego, you give space, an opening for your soul to come through. And at level 5, this is where you've developed that sense of internal cohesion when the beliefs of the ego align with the values of the soul. And you feel on purpose, you have meaning in your life, you've got passion, you've got commitment, and you're out there doing something important. And then you realize, well, if I really want to follow my passion, I need to work with others. And that's level 6 consciousness. When you move into strategic alliances with other people and collaborate with other people. And at the same time, because you're working on your growth needs, you deepen your own sense of internal connectedness. And once you're into this making a difference, you're having so much fun, you just move then into the level of service, level 7, to humanity and the planet, or to your children, or to your spouse, or to somebody. But you begin to live a life of service. And this is the highest level. You feel totally aligned with who you are. Now, is higher better? No. It's a development evolutionary path, but you need to be able to focus positively at every level. You want to be able to make money and survive. You want to have good relationships. You want to feel a sense of pride in what you do. You want to be operating at all of these levels of consciousness. Full spectrum is the way to go. So what about organizations? It's the same thing. Survival is about making money in a for-profit. If it's in a government, it's about having enough money, resources to do what you want to do. It's about belonging and loyalty and employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction. It's about high performance systems and processes at level 3. Now, there are the downside of this. If you get too focused, too much fear at level 1, you get into greed. Enron, beautiful example. The underlying belief is, I don't have enough. That's level 1. The underlying belief at level 2 is, I'm not loved enough or respected enough. At level 3, I am not enough. So I have to fight for the corner office, and I want the parking spot nearest the front door because that is who I am. You'll know who I am. Status. So there's a positive side and there's a limiting side. And then we move to level 4, which is the continuous renewal and learning of the organization. Is about diversity, accountability, adaptability, empowerment, teamwork, working together. And then we really come to work together at level 5, where we have a shared vision and a shared values. We're all heading in the same direction. And this is when people align their passion with the vision of the organization, and they come to work every day totally inspired. Can't wait to get to work in the morning. Are you like that? Good. Then we get to, now the organization is firing on all cylinders, but it begins to realize to build resilience and be out in the world, it needs to form strategic alliances. And then as we form those strategic alliances, we also want to deepen the sense of internal connectedness by focusing on employee fulfillment. And then finally, we begin to realize that the organization is part of society and that we better be ethical and that we better be socially responsible. We better think about future generations. So as I said earlier, you can see there are words that go with each of these levels. So if we could ask people, which values out of this list represent who you are and how your organization operates and how you'd like it to operate, we can begin to map consciousness, which this is what we do. So here's the first. We only asked 3 questions. Pick 10 values from this list of about 80 or 90 that represent who you are. So this person picked accountability, that's level 4. Balanced homework, that's level 4. Enthusiasm, it's level 5. But they don't know that. They're just words. The words that people resonate with when I say, pick 10 values that represent who you are. Yeah, that's me, that's me, that's me. Then we ask, pick 10 values that represent how your organization operates. Slightly different list because we've got customers in there here now and organizational stuff. And then 10 values that represent how you'd like your organization to operate. So we've got personal values, current culture, and desired culture, and we can begin to map that. But so if we had 100 employees and they all had 10 votes, which they do, then we can say which values got the most votes. So here's the top 10 values in this organization. Now you see here, there are some white dots which represent these words: image L, tradition L, control L. What does that stand for? L. It's a potentially limiting value. If you've got control, it's potentially, if your image is a potentially limiting value. Blame is a potentially limiting value. It's a value because it's showing up. In other words, if it wasn't showing up, it wouldn't be valuable. But it's a potentially limiting value. So here's the top 10 values of just an example. Now, it's 100 people, they all had 10 votes for the current culture. So that's 1,000 votes. So we can actually distribute all of the votes at all of the levels to see what is the distribution of consciousness, and all of those potentially limiting values show up at the first 3 levels, and we can actually find out what proportion of those potentially limiting values are there. And this gives us something called cultural entropy. It's the degree of dysfunction in the system from fear-based anxieties and beliefs. Cultural entropy. It's a really important number because from this number, I can tell you so much about what's going on. Now imagine if we could do this in our countries, in our societies. Well, we can. I'm going to show you. So, here's a typical engineering company. 339 people took part in this survey. Here are their top 10 personal values. These are the values that are most important to the employees in their personal lives. Honesty got 169 votes. It's at level 5. It's an individual value. Accountability came number 2. Here's the current culture. Continuous improvement was the top scoring value with 111 out of 339 people. Customer satisfaction got 111 too, and so on. And then we've got the desired culture here. Accountability was the top scoring value. Actually, accountability goes all the way through this system. And so we've got one matching personal value with the current culture is accountability. And we've got 4 matching current cultures, that's these orange values, with the desired culture. And we've got these 3 limiting values showing up here, which is job insecurity, inconsistent, and blame. So what we get from this is a conversation starter. It's almost like this is a mirror into the organization. And now we can see why, we can see this is who people are, this is what they've got, and this is what they want. And that is the beginning of the transformation effort. We've also got the distribution of all of the personal values, the distribution of all the current culture values, and the distribution of the desired cultural values. And the total percentage of limiting values in the survey was 23%. So I know 23% is not too bad, but when you get up to 30, 40%, you're getting into really serious conditions. And when you get above 45%, there's a good chance an organization will go bankrupt because there's so much energy going into those limiting values instead of into the positive work of the organization. Here's an example. Tom Boardman here took over one of the 4 big banks in South Africa in 2003, and it was almost bankrupt. And in fact, when Tom took over, he loves to tell the story that the next day the share price dropped another 6%. I mean, it was a dire situation. Tom called in McKinsey, and they started doing some work around structures, etc. And then he said, well, what do we do about the culture? And McKinsey said, well, contact Barrett Value Center. And he started measuring the values, 2005, 2006. Here are the current culture values in these years. And here's the level of cultural entropy, 25%. And these are the values that were showing up. 2 limiting values, bureaucracy and silo mentality. I mean, 25% is not that bad, but it's still not good. 2006, he worked on the results. Entropy went down to 19%. Continued to work the following year, it went down to 17%. The following year, it went down to 14%. Then to 13, and then to 30, and now, last year, it went down to 11%. And as they've worked with their values, they've managed their values, they've managed their consciousness. This is what I meant. We can measure consciousness, we can map it, we can manage it. So in 2010, This was what they looked like. No limiting values showing up right here, but still a lot of values at this level 3 consciousness, which is about productivity, efficiency, etc. I want you to notice that community involvement there, which a lot of banks have and like to have, was number 8 in the top 10. And commitment was number 10. And client-driven was number 5 in the desired culture. It was in the current culture, but it was also in the desired culture. The following year, community involvement dropped out of the top 10 and in popped environmental awareness. Wow, that was interesting. What happened there? And commitment went up from number 10 to number 8, and client-driven moved up too. So what I'm saying here is, in fine detail, you can manage a culture. You can see what's going on. You can pull the right levers in order to keep improving that culture. And why would you want to? So here's the entropy. Why would you want to do that? There's the entropy going down year by year. This is the people who responded to the survey going up every year, because they don't have to do the survey, but people begin to realize that if they do the survey, the leaders are listening, we're going to get some changes. So my opinion counts. Staff engagement went up. We had a bit of a drop in 2010, and it's climbing up again. Closing share price went up and up and up, but then we had 2008 and the economic meltdown, but it's been building up again. You can.
If you got these responses, what changed in the dynamics of the leadership?
Many things. What they did was they listened to the results. Now, one of the things that, I've got some videos that I'm not showing them tonight of Tom talking about this, but I'll give you one example he talks about. He says, the desired culture, there was a really strong need for accountability that came up. Everybody's asking for account. So they did a focus group on accountability, and it turned out that the grading system, it was on hierarchy. It was hierarchy. There's a limiting value. And so they did a focus group on hierarchy and say, well, why is it affecting us so much? Well, it turned out hierarchy was linked to the grade system. So what he did was he abolished the grade system, because they had like 27 grades, and it was regraded every 6 months. And 1 month before the grading, everybody was on the best behavior in order to get a higher grade. So they would get more money, etc., more benefits. He abolished the grading system. People didn't like it. And they said, well, how are we going to know how well we're doing? And he said, well, you'll know it in your paycheck. And the next year, hierarchy disappeared out of the top 10 values. Just disappeared. And so what you do is you pay attention to what's showing up, and then what Tom would do, he would pick 3 things every year and work on them. And so he drove down the entropy and built up the number of matching values. I didn't show you that, but every year the number of matching values between current and desired culture increased from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. So people were feeling more aligned and less entropy. So staff engagement went up. So we did a study with 169 companies in Australia, where we mapped staff engagement level with cultural entropy. It was a straight line relationship. When staff engagement is high, cultural entropy, dysfunction is very low, and vice versa. High staff engagement, low entropy, 3 times the revenue growth than the other way around. If you've got high entropy, low engagement, you're making $100 revenue, and if you do it the other way around, you're making 300. It's a significant difference, because people bring their discretionary energy to work when they're working in a culture that they're aligned with. Why does Fortune 500 company map the 100 best companies to work for every year? Because these are the high performers. And why are they high performers? It's right there. The best companies to work for. In other words, employees feel engaged. And what you unlock is the discretionary energy that people bring to the workplace, which they will not give you if they don't feel engaged. They save that discretionary energy for their pastimes and their family. But when they feel really engaged, man, company can take off. So, what can evolution teach us about this new leadership paradigm? So this is, so what we've been talking about up to now is really about my first 2 or 3 books around mapping and measuring consciousness. And now we're moving into the new leadership paradigm. And I want to talk about the 3 universal principles of evolution. Now, it took me like 5 years to figure out these principles, and when you'll see what the principles are, you'll go, oh my God, why did it take you 5 years? Because I had to study physics and chemistry and biology and sociology and find out what was common, what were the patterns of 14 billion years of evolution. And there are 3 universal principles, and they apply to everything. They apply to atoms, cells, dogs, cats, nations, and human beings. Let's talk about evolution. The continual unfolding ability to respond to